And then the one day, Dad says, oh, there's another truck here if you want to take the kids. So we take the kids down. And so he looks at it and he goes, Grandpa, when are you getting a real fire truck? 1 o'clock and go for a shower, and all the hot water was gone. And you look at the door, and there's a gap underneath the door, and there's snow blowing into the hotel about 2 feet of 2 feet like wide, not deep, but wide of snow that's gone under the door, and it's pretty chilly in there. And hanging on the wall of the hotel room were back scratchers.
Welcome to the Flaman Connect podcast, where we share real stories, experiences, and insights from people who know agriculture today and care where it's going in the future. Which province has the most farms?
Like sheer number of farms?
Number of farms, not by acre, just number of farms.
Alberta.
Okay, I'll say Manitoba.
The answer's Ontario.
Come on.
51,950 farms.
Okay.
According to the 2011 census.
Okay. It's only possible that that's a decade and some inaccurate, but it's probably not.
So 51,000. So which Western Canada province has the most farms?
Okay,
Stick
Manitoba.
with my original answer.
Yeah.
So that's Alberta. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you got that. 43,000. So it's like 8,000 more in Ontario.
So what's
Same
the
census.
average landmass or like the acreage size? And I feel like they call them hectares out east.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
They're not near as big.
No, they're
They're way smaller.
way smaller.
Yeah.
Typically, like, man, I hate asking a producer like, how many acres do you farm? And lots of them are cool about it because it is a metric that you can gauge like how, like the tools you need in your tool pouch. And I don't know, I've seen lots of people get like upset like at trade shows, like, how much money do you have in your wallet? I'm like, hey, you're buying a grain cleaner. If you tell me the amount of acres you farm, I have a pretty good idea how to spec out the size of cleaner. Like I can skip a lot of steps, not like, okay, what's your rotation and how many bushels are you pulling off? And it's like, how many acres you farm? Like and
You know what? I ask that question all the time, and nobody really gets upset about it because you're going down the road of how can we be more efficient with those acres that you farm, right? So you're just trying to understand what the pinch point is.
Bingo. And we talk about like adding combines to the fleet or when it makes sense to start adding a dryer to the fleet. And that's like, I don't know, that's the one metric that you can use to make sense and benchmark against other guys. I remember hearing of a guy that 5,000 acres, 1 combine, 1 dryer, and he was done before everyone else. And I couldn't wrap my head around that until it was like, that's what you say when it's about using the dryer to get into the field earlier and not use it at the end to get through harvest.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's time for our special guest. Our interview for this time around was recorded earlier at Ag Business Connect in Regina. So let's head over there now. Our guest today is Doug Termeer from Walinga, your sales representative. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
First off, please spell your name.
First name is Doug, D-O-U-G, not dog. Last name's Termeer, T-E-R-M-E-E-R.
I might just call you Doug Dog from now on.
When I was a kid, I worked for a landscaper, and he loved my name because he could tell me to dig Doug.
Are you French? Is that...
No,
not at all?
not at all.
Okay.
Dutch.
You're Dutch.
Dutch background, yeah.
Okay. Mom and dad?
All of the grandparents came over in the 50s.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool.
So,
Is that... So you're in Carman, Manitoba, right? That's where you live?
yeah,
Is it a
Carman.
big Dutch settlement there?
Yeah, I think there'd be like, of the group that came over in those, like after World War II, there'd probably be pushing 750 to 1,000 in the area.
Mm-hmm.
So quite a few.
So what was it like for you as a kid? Big family, small family?
Big family.
Oh, yeah.
I'm one of 9 kids.
Ooh.
Nice.
Wow.
Where do you fit in there?
So numerically, I am the 6th. Age-wise, I'm right in the middle. So
Yeah.
I got 4 older brothers, an older sister, and then a younger sister and 2 younger brothers. But currently right now, my oldest brother just turned 40 in August.
Yeah.
I'm 30, and my youngest brother is 20.
So how do you feel that shaped your life, being number 6 of all of those kids?
It was busy.
Yeah.
You know, I was the one sandwiched between two sisters. So, you know, where the older brothers, they always had somebody you know, at first you had lots of guys to play hockey with and, you know, play sports and do that kind of stuff. And then eventually they'd all move out and get older and I don't want to play mini sticks. So I was the one that sisters didn't want to play. So you bounce the tennis ball off the wall and then you have to play goalie. And
So as a compromise,
or dress up.
yeah, I was going to say, how many times did you have makeup applied to you?
never.
Yeah.
I don't believe it. No, not doing it. My sister and I are 13 months apart, and I 100% had makeup on me. So, yeah. I'm mostly curious, like, how did you guys get somewhere? Like, what was your vehicle of choice?
Oh, well, at first it was a big old Beauville full-size van. If you remember those ones? And that was...
Did it have a little, like a heart-shaped window in the back or like a teardrop or something like that?
No.
No.
Just a big old people mover.
Just a big old bus.
And so but then you got to remember, there's a big age gap.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So by the time the youngest ones came around, then my oldest siblings, they weren't coming on family holidays and they would drive their own vehicles.
Yep.
So they were 19 when my oldest brother was 19 when the youngest one came. So yeah, he wasn't driving around with the family anymore.
What did your folks do?
So my dad did auto body for 27 years. And then so he sold the body shop in the kind of the mid 90s. And then so for the last number of years, he sold fire equipment. So fire trucks, fire hose, turnout gear, jaws of life, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So
How do you get a gig selling fire trucks?
I was going to say, you never really think that there's a market for that, but someone's got to make them and someone's got to sell them and someone's going to buy them.
So he was a volunteer firefighter on the fire department in town.
Got it.
So he did that for, I think, 28 years as well. And so he'd been doing that for quite a while. And then that's when he got into selling them.
Where did the trucks come from?
The company he worked for, he's retired now. They were made in the U.S. So there was a few different plants in the U.S. that they came out of.
I know there's a plant in Saskatoon that builds ambulances.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
Crestline, right?
Crestline, yeah.
And you see Crestline sends
Everywhere. Yeah.
There's a company in Winnipeg that makes them as well. And there's actually a Hutterite colony in Manitoba that does too.
that makes ambulances or fire
trucks.
Really?
Yeah.
So are they on is it a semi chassis that they're on? Is it a Kenworth or a Peterbilt of some sort, or what are they?
Whatever they want.
Okay.
Yeah. There is custom ones, like the ones you see driving around the city. Those are custom, call them custom cabs, and they're specially designed. But like where we are, most of the rural places, they're on International or Freightliner or whatever.
So your dad then, would he work for something that does like a retrofitted fire truck body on like a normal Freightliner style?
He worked for the dealer, so they sold everything.
Okay.
So
cool.
yeah, they could build it on whatever they want. But you were talking about bringing your kids there. So selling trucks, Dad always had fire trucks sitting in the driveway.
Yeah.
So we'd take the kids to go visit, my parents. And he'd always have fire trucks there. So every couple of weeks, there'd be a different fire truck for them to see and climb all over. So they get pretty spoiled. And then the one day, Dad says, "Oh, there's another truck here if you want to take the kids." So we take the kids down. And my oldest, he probably would have been about 5 at the time. And Dad had it was a truck on like a F350 or F450 chassis. So it was for wildland firefighting.
Mm-hmm.
And so he looks at it and he goes, "Grandpa, when are you getting a real fire truck?"
He would have just loved that.
Yeah. It's like, you're spoiled when, it's not even a thrill to see a small fire truck.
So what other fun memories you have growing up?
I think some of the best memories will be playing hockey on the river behind our house. So we had the river right behind our house. And so we would always have it cleared off and shovel off the snow. And so with myself and all my brothers and friends and whoever else we could get together, we'd go play hockey on the riverbank. And there's no board, so you spend lots and lots of time digging the puck out of the snowbank because you lose all of the pucks. But yeah, that's some of the best memories. That and you would have
been able to field your entire hockey team with just your siblings. If you really think about it, like you didn't have to call the neighbor kids too hard if you wanted to.
You had enough for 3-on-3 or.
What about work? Did you have a high school job? What eventually led to you teaming up with Walinga?
Well, I started working at about 13 years old or 12 years old, I think I was. So I worked at the Ford dealership in town. They needed somebody to scrub the floors on the weekend and clean hoses and sweep up floor dry. So my brother was working there at the time and he didn't feel like cleaning it up. So I showed up and did it for a couple of weeks. And then they said, "Well, why don't you keep coming back?" And so we did that for a few years, just cash under the table.
Yeah.
Because, too young to put on the payroll. And then eventually they did. They realized they had to, and they put it on there, and they put a list down of all the stuff I was doing, and they're like, yeah, actually you can't do all of this stuff. You're not supposed to do that as a youth. So I did that for quite a few years, and then worked for a landscaper, cutting grass and digging and laying patio blocks down and that kind of stuff. So, and then from there, actually, I started working for Walinga my first time right out of high school.
Oh, really?
So I spent about two and a half years at Walinga as soon as I had graduated. So I worked in the service department, servicing the feed trailers and the vacs and doing that kind of stuff. And then from there, I transitioned over to the assembly shop. So the blowers and the airlocks, I spent about a year and a half building blowers and building airlocks. So if you ever have a Walinga blower or an airlock, there'll be a serial number stamped onto it. And so if the first two letters of a Walinga serial number on the blowers and the airlocks, not on the units, but on the blowers and the airlocks, is the initials of whoever built it.
Oh, really?
Cool.
So if you see a blower and an airlock and it's got DT initials, then there's a very, very good chance that I built that one.
Nice.
So was that an ad you saw and just, hey, I need a job out of high school, I'm going to apply here, or do you know someone there?
It's a small town, yeah. My dad actually had worked for a little while there too, and one of my friends, his dad was the manager of the location. So yeah, it's just something
what's population of Carman?
About 3,500 people.
Okay, so how many employees does Walinga have there?
In Carman location, we're up to about 50.
Oh, yeah, that's a pretty big deal
decent.
for a pretty small town.
Yeah.
Like growing up in Southie and working at Flaman, like that was a pretty big. There was a lot of people that worked at Flaman in that small town. So
Well, yeah.
So yeah, I did that for a couple of years, and then I quit, and I didn't think I was going to be coming back and doing sales for Walinga, and then, my dad was in sales at that point in time. I said, that doesn't seem like a bad gig, so I took a short sales and marketing course, and did a few years selling some other stuff, and then Walinga was looking, or I heard that Walinga might be looking for a sales guy, and
You have experience.
So how long ago was that?
November would have been 8 years doing this, doing sales for Walinga.
What else did you sell? You said you took some other sales jobs.
I worked for a company called Fastenal, so nuts and bolts and cleaning
Fastenal,
supplies and tools and all that kind of stuff. So I was based out of the Winkler area. So if you're in the egg industry and you look at, where a lot of the egg equipment comes from, it comes from there. So it wasn't a bad area to sell parts in.
Straight to manufacturers. A lot, hey?
Oh, yeah.
So Walinga is actually a pretty big company, and you talk about it being based out of Ontario. So in the agriculture side, we're pretty used to the blowers and the airlocks, but I feel like that's not the big part of what Walinga does.
No, so what Walinga started out doing is building, I think it was like some wagons and stuff like that is what they first got into, and then truck boxes.
In Ontario, though.
In Ontario, and so it was used for a lot of the farmers used them out there for picking up and delivering feed and kind of the mixed farms there, where they had something that they could haul their feed with and something they could haul some grain with and that kind of thing. And then what the real core part of the business right now is feed trailers. So if you see the ones, driving around the Maple Leaf or the Master Feeds, whatever it is, and they got the big auger on the side for, I know there's a bunch in the Humboldt area, a bunch of feed mills, but if you see those driving around in Western Canada, there's a very, very good chance that it's a Walinga trailer.
I remember in the 80s, we shared with a neighbor a Walinga grain vac. That was my first experience with Walinga. And that was good technology. I mean, the alternative to that is a shovel. And I use that often too, but it was a big loud machine, but it was super cool because you sucked that bin dry, and there'd be mice in there, and you'd have fun trying to suck the mice up.
So if that's where Walinga started, how does Carman get on the map? Was there a company there that with an acquisition that took place, or did it just make sense to start moving west?
I think there was a few factors involved. At that point in time, they had already set up a service center in Carman for a lot of the feed trailers. And the sales guy had moved out here. They had some service people, some personnel here already. So there was some sort of an established business in Manitoba already at that time. And so that was kind of the start of it. And they needed to service the customers out here. At that point in time, you were mentioning those old, the old screaming 510 vacs. There was a lot of vacs coming out to Western Canada. They would come out and, truckloads after truckloads of vacs to Western Canada. It was wild how many we were moving out here. And so they constantly had trucks coming west. And so at that time, I believe also the foundry that we were buying a lot of the cast steel from was out west here, or I might have actually just been south of the border, but it was
Would you call it a foundry?
a foundry for pouring cast iron.
Okay, time for me to learn something. I have never heard of this word in my life. A foundry. Spell it.
Foundry.
Exactly the way it sounds. Okay.
Yes.
So
So basically, like if you look at our blower or the
Yeah.
airlocks, it's all, formed steel.
Yeah.
It's cast. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they make a sand mold, they pack together sand, and then they pour it full of steel. And then the steel cools and they break it off, and then that's the base.
That's why it's got a bit of a rough finish to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very
and then the
cool.
inside's all machined, but
Yep.
So a foundry or metal factory casts metal into shapes by melting them down and pouring the molten liquid into a sand, ceramic, or metal mold to form geometrically complex parts.
Yep.
so
now you know.
Now you know.
so yeah, they moved the factory out to Manitoba, and then that way they have a backhaul. So now the way it stands right now, every 2 weeks, usually we have a truck that goes back and forth. So it brings the finished blowers and airlocks and whatever machined parts back to the main factory, and then the whatever the stuff that I sell or you guys sell, it all comes the other way on the truck.
So is in Carman, you guys are assembly essentially?
Yeah, so we have our machining division is based out of
Yeah.
Carman. So we machine all of the parts, like the machine parts. We have our CNCs and our lathes and all the fancy equipment that machines the metal, and then the assembly. So the blowers and airlocks are finished, and then they're a finished unit, and then go back to the main office, our main plant.
Cool.
Very cool.
But you also have like a repair facility there for the trailers.
Yes,
So
so
we
yeah,
got to
there's a
tour
large
Oh yeah.
service center there.
and an R&D facility too.
Yes,
So there's a little bit
you've been
more
there.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. I got to get down there.
It's really impressive setup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it was really good when we went down. Got to
So
look around.
we're starting with Walinga. Did you hit the road right away, or did you stay around the Manitoba and then eventually expand through Western Canada, or how did it work?
So from day one, when I was hired, it was Manitoba, Saskatchewan was
Okay.
my area. At that point in time, there was another rep, Henry, and he had been doing a lot of the pneumatic conveying sales as well, and he was just getting too busy. We do a lot of the stuff with the commercial industry, and so at that point in time, we were putting in a lot of central vac systems.
Yep.
So it's very similar to central vac you have in your house. It's just way larger, and we put it in grain terminals like Richardson or Viterra or the companies like that. And so he was very, very busy selling that. And so then we needed to have, some more support for him. So at that point in time, I was hired to more or less sell the stuff on farm to the on farm locations. And then over the next few years, then I transitioned to doing all of the pneumatic conveying stuff in Manitoba, Saskatchewan. So Marty covers Alberta, and then I cover Manitoba, Saskatchewan. So yeah, it was right off the hop. It was throughout Western or Manitoba, Saskatchewan, but with Henry there, I had a lot of support from him, and then we have a few other people that I would say I was blessed to have a very good surrounding crew that definitely helped me.
Yeah.
The first few years, get my feet under me, understand the industry, understand the product. That really, really helped me.
Have you you've toured and stayed in a lot of small towns in Saskatchewan, Manitoba? There's a follow-up question to this.
Oh, toured most of them.
What is the worst? And you don't have to mention the town name, but what is the worst hotel you've stayed at through your travels?
Well, that one that one is a very easy question, and the hotel has now been demolished, and so I don't feel bad.
Yeah.
So every year Brandon has their egg days, and if anybody's been there, it is impossible to get a hotel room. So if you somebody doesn't have that booked, you're scrambling. So right on the corner of right off number 1 in Brandon, there used to be a little place called Barney's, and it was one of those old long motels, single level, and we had to stay there for the 1 year, and it was something. They had not enough hot water, and so the older guys that were there, and they were in the rooms next to me. Well, they were all wide awake at 6 o'clock in the morning, and so they'd take their shower, and I'd wake up at 6:30, 7 o'clock, and go for a shower, and all the hot water was gone. And you look at the door, and there's a gap underneath the door, and there's snow blowing into the hotel about 2 feet of 2 feet like wide, not deep, but wide snow that's gone under the door, and it's pretty chilly in there. And I think the thing that took the cake was hanging on the wall of the hotel room were back scratchers. I don't know who would ever use a back scratcher that was hanging on the wall in a hotel room, but
For your convenience. Here's a pack. Wow.
So
Yeah, some hotels you check in, they give you like a nice warm cookie. These ones pride themselves on, but when you get in there and take your shoes off, you can also just give your back a nice little scratch that itch.
yeah, thankfully we got a nice hotel now in Brandon. We don't have that this year.
There's a bit of a difference in doing business in Manitoba and doing business in Saskatchewan. Can you talk a little bit about what those differences would be and some of the experiences you've had in dealing in both provinces?
Oh, it's exactly the same. There's no difference.
So there's a couple of things. The dryers, first off, to the inspection process needed to hook up a grain dryer in Manitoba is a lot stricter than the inspection process is in Saskatchewan. And I think Alberta's, there isn't one, but in Manitoba, the Office of the Fire Commissioner has to inspect every dryer. So even if it's a CSA dryer, even if it's been the pipe fitters going in, the Office of the Fire Commissioner has to come down and they have to inspect everything before you're allowed to actually start it. So they're going to check every single one of the safety valves. And if you have a propane tank, they're going to look at the line going from the propane tank to the dryer, and they're going to make sure you have nice posts, and so that nobody can drive into anything, nobody can drive into the dryer. Make sure that your electrical and everything is far enough apart. And even now, it's unfortunately not getting better. It's getting worse, which kind of leads into the next one, which is the hydro. And in Western Canada, we don't have three-phase power everywhere. So now most customers are putting in generators so that they have the power supply to run the handling and the drying system. And even those generators now, the fire commissioner is wanting to look at the generators because they say there's a diesel engine. So then they're looking at that. But on the power side of things, I think Saskatchewan's the same in the fact that there is very little three-phase power access for most of the farms, and Manitoba is the same way. The difference is that Manitoba Hydro really is sticky on allowing you to put larger motors and to use variable speed drives on your farm. It's got to the point where if you want to put a VFD on, you Manitoba Hydro won't even approve it. You basically just have to go
I
through.
don't understand that. Shouldn't they want you to put one on?
So without getting too technical or something, basically they're saying is it's something called harmonics that's created when you put a variable speed drive on. And so when a VFD slows down the power coming in, so you can slow down your motor. And when you slow it down, if there's an inrush of power, it can backfeed it into the line. And so your neighbor's washing machine might lose their computer, is the thought process.
Oh, okay, sure.
So in my opinion, essentially it comes down to that the grid is not sufficient to handle the higher horsepower motors, the higher flow. And so then they just, rather than upgrading the grid, they just say, no, you can't do those big motors.
But there are like things like line reactors and stuff that you can put in line
Protect.
to minimize the harmonics.
From my understanding, we put a line reactor in every blower, do we not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my favorite part about Trevor.
Yeah.
Tell me I can't do it, and then I'll just show you how I'm going to.
Well, it's very frustrating from a retail standpoint between both provinces to navigate the gauntlet of red tape in one province versus the other. And you're exactly right. Alberta's wide open.
Yeah.
Which would be fantastic. But I'm okay with Saskatchewan. We can
that happy medium.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Well, it's good to have some sort of standards.
Yes.
I mean, I don't mind
for sure.
I don't mind the inspection process. I get along with the inspectors and things like that. And there's a standard there that should be followed. Like if you're in Alberta, like it doesn't matter if the unions are hand tight or not, like whatever, go ahead. Yeah. It's an outdoor appliance.
I would have never guessed that though in Alberta with just how much oil field stuff is there. And like, cause I know that like expectations in the oil field are relatively strict. Like there's a lot of things that aren't, but I would assume that would just cascade right into the agriculture sector, but guess not.
Well, we sold a dryer in Manitoba this last year, and the guy is still stymied because he needed an off-grid permit. So he's running a generator, but he still needs a permit to run a generator that's really not on the grid, but he needs a permit to tell him that he's not on the grid. And no one has heard about this permit before. It came completely out of left field. So it just seems like they just come up with new ways to put up a roadblock. So where is that side of the industry going as far as, pneumatics and moving grain or maybe even, feed? Like where is Walinga going to be in 5 to 10?
I think the grain I think you have to look at the whole grain handling industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that whole industry is just going to continue to grow. I was sitting around at one trade show and with a bunch of my coworkers, and every single one of them had a Class 1 license that was kind of into that, 50 plus range. Now, if I look at, I'm 30 into the, 30 to 40 generation, how many of us have Class 1 licenses?
Not
Significantly less. So now if you look at, the farmers, the commercial facilities, whatever it may be, having to move grain around the yard, having to, haul grain, it's getting a lot harder for them to find truck drivers. So, a couple years ago, it was, nobody could find truckers anywhere. And that's, I think, going to transition to a lot more farmers wanting to put in some sort of, I don't want to say automation, but something that they don't have to physically be there. They're not sitting there and dragging the grain out of the bin and driving the truck or the grain cart 200 feet down and then putting it into the next bin.
Auger in, auger out, move it around. Yeah.
So that's where I think that it's the grain handling industry is going to continue to grow, just from a, saving on time, saving on man hours.
I think that's like, that is an ongoing theme. I think from the horsepower, like the labor, the resource side of the ag industry, that's been on the radar for a while, but that is a theme that with lots of the guests we've had on this podcast, they all say the same thing. It's like, and I know autonomous stuff is whatever fun to talk about because it's like, we know that will be a thing one day, but it's really only a thing because labor shortage is a thing, right? So the amount of positions you can put a robot into ultimately increases efficiencies. We look at these seed tenders that we sell. That's a time tool. We look at the yard sites that we're building and the bucket elevators and the pneumatic systems that we're putting in. And the pits, like the unloading pits, it's a time tool. I think that theme has been there for a while. I think there's a lot of equipment that, really caters to it. And I don't think it's going away.
No.
I'd agree with you. And actually there's been, 8 years isn't that long, but at the same point in time, I've definitely noticed a transition. When the first few years when we started to sell the systems, we'd sell a system and, the dryer, and you talk to the customer and the customer would be like, yeah, I'm putting it in. I hope I never have to use it.
Yeah.
That was the comment that was made. It was more of an insurance policy.
Yeah.
If we ever have that wet year. And now if you look at, the customers who put in a dryer, put in a blower and a bucket elevator, how many of them never turn it on? Just about all of them are going that, if they can get in a week earlier, get in a couple hours earlier in the morning, they all get used every year now.
You've been dealing with Flaman for 6 years.
Yes.
Ish.
6, 7, somewhere in there. I'd have to look back to see exactly when it started, but yeah.
A lot of that business, a lot of that growth came on the back of the work you put in and the service that has helped us to get to where we are. So really thank you for the sacrifice you made. And you're one of the best reps that deal with us. And
I can echo that. Doug, you are actually a great rep.
Yeah.
I won't say who my not favorite reps are, but you definitely appreciate when you get a good rep that like answers their phone, but then is also able to come out on site. You're very well liked and appreciated on our team because you really put the work in those years when we were pulling our hair out.
And we'd like to thank your wife too, because there's a lot of times I'm sure where you get the phone call and hey, like Trevor and the boys have a customer in Melfort and they can't figure this blower out, dear. And I know I was supposed to go to the in-laws this weekend, but I'm really going to have to get on the road.
Totally. No, I appreciate it.
But she's got a lot to do with it too. So
absolutely.
On behalf of us, thank her.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today, Doug. Our guest today has been Doug Termeer from Walinga. He's our sales rep and after sales care representative. I'm your host, Trevor Grinde, with Mitch Flaman and Regan Kuntz. Thank you for listening to Flaman Connect.